You think you know the American West, but let me tell you something that's going to change everything you thought you understood about cowboys, cattle drives, and the frontier, because the image burned into your mind by Hollywood, those rugged white men in dusty hats riding across the plains, that's not just incomplete, it's a deliberate erasure of one of the most remarkable stories in American history. Picture this. It's 1866, the Civil War has just ended, and across Texas, thousands of newly freed black men are making a choice that will reshape an entire region. They're heading west, not as settlers in covered wagons, but as cowboys, and here's the truth that'll blow your mind. 1 in 4 cowboys in the American West was black. That's not a footnote, that's not a small detail. That's 25% of every cattle drive, every ranch, every dusty trail from Texas to Montana. But you wouldn't know it from the movies, would you? You wouldn't know it from the shows, the books, the stories we tell ourselves about American history, because somewhere along the way, someone decided these men didn't fit the narrative, someone decided their stories weren't worth telling, and so they disappeared, erased from history like they were never there at all. But they were there, and what they accomplished, what they survived, what they built with their bare hands in one of the harshest environments on Earth, that's a story that demands to be told, and today you're going to hear it, the real story, the hidden truth about how black cowboys didn't just participate in building the American West. They were essential to it, they were the backbone of it, and without them, the West as we know it wouldn't exist. Let's go back to that moment in 1866. You're a black man in Texas, you've just been freed, and you're standing at a crossroads that millions of African Americans faced. What do you do now? You could stay in the South, try to work the same land where you've been enslaved, face the rising violence of angry former Confederates and the birth of the Ku Klux Klan, or you could head west, where the cattle industry is exploding, where ranchers need skilled riders, and where, just maybe, the color of your skin might matter less than your ability to rope a steer. For thousands of black men, the choice was clear, they'd go west, and here's something crucial you need to understand. Many of these men already knew how to ride, how to rope, how to handle cattle, because on southern plantations before the war, enslaved men had often been tasked with managing livestock. They'd developed skills that white plantation owners valued but never thought to acknowledge, and now, in freedom, those skills became their ticket to a new life. The cattle boom was exploding in Texas, millions of longhorns roaming wild after being neglected during the war years, and ranchers needed men, lots of men, to round them up and drive them north to the railheads in Kansas, Missouri, and eventually Montana, Wyoming, and the Dakotas. The pay was terrible, about $1 a day, the work was brutal, 15 to 18 hours in the saddle, and the danger was constant, river crossings that could drown you, stampedes that could trample you, rattlesnakes, scorpions, and outlaws waiting to steal the herd. But for black cowboys, it was freedom, real freedom, the kind you could taste in the dust and feel in the ache of your muscles at the end of the day. Now let me introduce you to some names, because these weren't nameless figures. These were men with stories, with families, with dreams that stretched as wide as the plains they crossed. There was Nat Love, born into slavery in Tennessee in 1854, who became one of the most famous cowboys of the era. Love headed west in his teens and became so skilled with a rope and a gun that he earned the nickname Deadwood Dick, after winning a roping and shooting contest in Deadwood, South Dakota in 1876, the same town where Wild Bill Hickok was killed that same year. Love could ride anything with 4 legs, he could shoot the head off a rattlesnake at 20 paces, and he could rope a running steer while his horse was at full gallop, and he wrote about it all in his autobiography, one of the few first-hand accounts we have from a black cowboy, and in those pages you can feel the pride, the joy, the absolute freedom he felt on the range. Then there was Bose Eichard, born into slavery in Mississippi in 1843, who became one of the most trusted cowboys working for legendary cattleman Charles Goodnight. And here's something that'll tell you everything you need to know about Eichard. When he died in 1929, Goodnight, this powerful white rancher, paid for a marker on his grave that read, "Bose Eichard served with me 4 years on the Goodnight-loving trail, never shirked a duty or disobeyed an order, rode with me in many stampedes, participated in 3 engagements with Comanches, splendid behavior. That's not sentiment, that's respect, the kind of respect earned through years of proving yourself in the most dangerous situations imaginable." And there was Bill Pickett, born in 1870 in Travis County, Texas, to parents who were former slaves. Pickett didn't just ride and rope, he invented an entirely new rodeo event called bulldogging, or steer wrestling, where a cowboy jumps from his horse onto a running steer, grabs its horns and wrestles it to the ground. But Pickett had his own technique. He'd bite the steer's lip, the same way cattle dogs did, to help bring it down, and crowds went absolutely wild for it. Pickett performed all over the world, from Mexico to South America to England. He was inducted into the Rodeo Hall of Fame, and he worked as a cowboy and performer until 1932, when he was kicked in the head by a horse at age 61 and died from the injuries. He'd spent his entire life on horseback, doing what he loved, showing the world what a black cowboy could do. These weren't exceptions. These were representative of thousands of black cowboys whose names we'll never know. Men who drove cattle on the Chisholm Trail, the Goodnight Loving Trail, the Western Trail. Men who helped establish ranches in Montana, worked the ranges of Wyoming, broke horses in Colorado, and built the infrastructure of the American cattle industry from the ground up. But let's talk about what life was really like on those cattle drives. Because this wasn't some romantic adventure. This was hard, dangerous, relentless work that tested every ounce of strength and courage a man had. A typical drive might last 3 to 4 months, covering over 1,000 miles. The crew would wake before dawn, usually around 3 or 4 in the morning, and wouldn't stop until well after dark. 12 to 15 hours in the saddle was normal, sometimes 18 during the difficult stretches. Black cowboys often drew the worst jobs on the drive. They were frequently assigned to ride drag, the back of the herd where the dust was thickest, where you'd spend all day choking on dirt kicked up by hundreds or thousands of cattle, where you couldn't see more than a few feet in front of your horse. But they did the work, and they did it well, because proving yourself was the only way to earn better positions, to gain the respect that might mean the difference between life and death when things went wrong. And things went wrong constantly. River crossings were terrifying. Imagine trying to get 1,000 longhorns across the swollen Arkansas River or the Red River in flood season. The current could sweep away horses and cattle in seconds. Cowboys had to ride into the churning water, guiding the herd, praying their horse wouldn't lose its footing, and if you fell in, weighed down by boots and gear, your chances of survival weren't good. Black cowboys drowned in those rivers. Their bodies swept away, buried in unmarked graves if they were found at all. Then there were the stampedes, and if you've never witnessed a cattle stampede, you can't imagine the terror. Anything could trigger one. A sudden noise, a flash of lightning, a rattlesnake startling the herd, and suddenly thousands of tons of panicked beef are thundering across the prairie at 30 miles an hour, and the cowboy's job was to ride alongside, to try to turn the leaders, to get them running in a circle until they'd tire themselves out. You're riding at full speed in the dark. Your horse could step in a prairie dog hole and break its leg, sending you tumbling under those hooves. You could lose your hat or your seat, and black cowboys did all of this, rode into those stampedes again and again, because that was the job, because the crew depended on everyone doing their part, because failure meant dead cattle, lost wages, and possibly dead men. Native American raids were another constant threat, especially in the early years. The Comanche were still defending their territory in the 1860s and 1870s, and they didn't care what color you were. If you were driving cattle through their land, you were a target. Black cowboys fought alongside white cowboys in these encounters. They stood guard at night, they scouted ahead for signs of ambush, and they earned reputations as men you wanted on your side when trouble came. Now here's where the story gets really interesting, because despite all this, despite proving themselves day after day, despite being essential to the success of these cattle drives, black cowboys still faced discrimination that would make your blood boil. They were often paid less than white cowboys doing the exact same job. While a white cowboy might earn $30 to $40 a month, a black cowboy might get $25, and that's if they were lucky. Some were paid even less or compensated in goods rather than cash. They faced segregation in the towns at the end of the trail, those wild cattle towns like Dodge City, Abilene, and Ogallala, where cowboys came to blow off steam after months on the trail. Black cowboys couldn't enter the same saloons, couldn't stay in the same hotels, couldn't eat in the same restaurants after working side by side with white cowboys for months, risking their lives together, saving each other from stampedes and river crossings. They'd arrive in town and be told they weren't welcome in the same spaces. Some towns had colored sections where black cowboys could find accommodation and entertainment, but these were often the most dangerous parts of town, where violence was common and law enforcement was minimal or hostile. And yet black cowboys carved out their own communities, their own social spaces. They created their own joy and their own culture despite these restrictions. They organized their own rodeos, their own competitions, their own celebrations of their skills and accomplishments. And speaking of rodeos, let's talk about how black cowboys dominated early rodeo competitions, because this is where the skill level becomes undeniable. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, before rodeo became heavily segregated, black cowboys competed and won regularly. Bill Pickett wasn't the only one. There was Jesse Stahl, called the greatest bronc rider of his era by many who saw him perform. Stahl would sometimes ride broncs backwards, facing the horse's tail, just to show off, just to prove he could do things other cowboys couldn't even imagine. He competed all over the West in the early 1900s and was known for his incredible balance and fearlessness. There was also Nat Love winning that 1876 Deadwood competition, and countless others whose names weren't recorded. Black cowboys winning roping contests, riding contests, bulldogging events, proving again and again that they were among the best riders and ropers in the world. But as rodeo became more commercialized, as it became a professional sport with real money involved, segregation crept in. Black cowboys found themselves excluded from major competitions, relegated to separate colored rodeos, or simply written out of the history entirely. And that erasure, that deliberate removal of black cowboys from the story of American rodeo, that's a crime against history. Let me tell you about the all-black towns that cowboys helped establish, because this is crucial to understanding the full impact of black cowboys on the West. As these men earned money and gained skills, many of them decided to settle down, to establish their own communities where they could live free from the discrimination and violence they'd faced elsewhere. Towns like Nicodemus in Kansas, founded in 1877, and Boley in Oklahoma, founded in 1903, became havens for black Americans seeking a fresh start, and many of the founders and early residents were former cowboys, men who'd saved their wages from years on the trail, who'd learned to handle horses and cattle, who'd developed the toughness and self-reliance necessary to survive on the frontier. These towns had black sheriffs, black mayors, black business owners, black ranchers. They were self-governing communities where African Americans could live without constant fear, where they could build schools for their children, churches for their worship, businesses for their prosperity, and they thrived. For a time, they showed what black Americans could accomplish when given the chance, when not held back by systematic oppression. But even these communities faced challenges. White neighbors sometimes resented their success. Banks refused to lend them money. And when Oklahoma became a state in 1907, it immediately passed Jim Crow laws that undermined black political power and economic progress. But the towns persisted. Some still exist today, living monuments to the courage and determination of black cowboys and settlers who refused to accept second-class citizenship. Now let's talk about the most painful part of this story, the erasure, because what happened to these men, to their stories, to their rightful place in American history, that's not an accident, that's a deliberate act of historical theft. As the West became romanticized in American culture, as Buffalo Bill's Wild West shows toured the country, as dime novels and later Hollywood movies created the mythology of the cowboy, black cowboys were systematically removed from the narrative. Buffalo Bill Cody's show featured Native Americans, featured Mexican vaqueros, featured sharpshooting Annie Oakley, but black cowboys were largely absent or relegated to comic relief roles that mocked rather than celebrated their abilities. The dime novels that Americans devoured by the millions almost never featured black heroes, and when they mentioned black cowboys at all, it was in stereotyped, diminished roles. The heroic cowboys were always white, the villains were often Mexican or Native American, and black characters, when they appeared, were sidekicks or servants, never the heroes of their own stories. Then came Hollywood, and the erasure became complete. From the silent era through the golden age of westerns. From John Wayne to Clint Eastwood, black cowboys were almost entirely absent. You could watch hundreds of western films and never see a single black face, or if you did, it would be in a subservient role, never as a skilled rider, never as a hero, never as a central character whose story mattered. This wasn't oversight, this was choice. Filmmakers and studios knew about black cowboys. Historical records existed, photographs existed, but they chose to exclude them. They chose to create a version of the West that was almost entirely white, because that's the story they wanted to tell. That's the mythology they wanted to build, a mythology of white American expansion, white American courage, white American triumph over the wilderness. And in that mythology, there was no room for the truth that 1 in 4 cowboys was black, that black men had built the cattle industry, that black skill and black courage were essential to every aspect of Western expansion. And generations of Americans grew up believing this lie, believing that the West was built by white men alone, never knowing that black cowboys had ridden the same trails, faced the same dangers, demonstrated the same courage, and in many cases shown greater skill than their white counterparts. That's cultural theft on a massive scale, and the impact of that theft echoes through American culture to this day. But here's what you need to understand. The evidence was always there, hiding in plain sight for anyone willing to look. Photographs from the 1870s and 1880s show mixed-race cowboy crews. You can see black faces standing alongside white faces, holding the same ropes, wearing the same dusty clothes, looking into the camera with the same confident, weathered expressions. Census records show thousands of black men listing their occupation as cowboy or stock hand throughout the western states. Oral histories passed down through black families tell stories of grandfathers and great-grandfathers who rode the ranges, who drove cattle, who lived the cowboy life, and a precious few like Nat Love, wrote down their experiences, leaving first-hand accounts that historians can't ignore. But for decades, these sources were overlooked, dismissed, considered less important than the romanticized white narratives that dominated popular culture. It took the civil rights movement, took black historians and activists demanding that African American history be taken seriously, be taught accurately, be given the respect it deserved. Before the story of black cowboys began to resurface, scholars like Philip Durham and Everett L. Jones published The Negro Cowboys in 1965, one of the first comprehensive studies of black cowboys, and slowly, painfully slowly, the truth began to work its way back into public consciousness. And the impact of these men extended far beyond their own lifetimes, because black cowboys represented something powerful. They represented black freedom, black skill, black self-reliance. They showed that African Americans could succeed in one of the most demanding professions in America, could earn respect through their abilities, could live lives of adventure and purpose, and that example mattered to black communities across the country. Children growing up hearing stories about black cowboys, about men like their fathers or grandfathers or uncles who'd ridden the range, who'd been tough and skilled and free, those stories provided a counter-narrative to the systematic oppression and discrimination black Americans faced in other parts of the country. The legacy of black cowboys influenced the black rodeo circuit that developed in the mid-20th century, influenced black Western films and literature, influenced a sense of black pride and black possibility that said, "We've always been part of this country's story. We've always contributed, we've always excelled, and no amount of erasure can change those facts." Today, organizations like the Black American West Museum in Denver work to preserve and share these stories, to educate new generations about the true diversity of the American West, to ensure that black cowboys finally receive the recognition they've always deserved. And let's be clear about something. This isn't about diminishing anyone else's contributions. This isn't about taking anything away from white cowboys or Mexican vaqueros or Native American horsemen. This is about telling the complete truth, about acknowledging that the American West was built by people of all races, that the iconic cowboy image should reflect that diversity, that when we teach children about the West, we should teach them about Nat Love and Bill Pickett and Bose Eichert alongside Wyatt Earp and Wild Bill Hickok and all the other legendary figures. We should teach them that 1 in 4 cowboys was black, that African Americans were essential to the cattle industry, that black skill and black courage help tame the frontier just as much as anyone else's. The erasure of black cowboys from history is part of a larger pattern of erasing black contributions to American society. Whether it's black inventors, black scientists, black soldiers, black entrepreneurs, there's been a consistent effort to minimize, dismiss, or simply ignore African American achievements, to create a narrative where white Americans did everything important and everyone else was just along for the ride. But that narrative is a lie, a comfortable lie that some people prefer to believe, but a lie nonetheless. Think about what it means that millions of Americans grew up believing cowboys were white, Think about how that shaped their understanding of American history, of who built this country, of who demonstrated courage and skill and determination. Think about the black children who loved Westerns but never saw anyone who looked like them portrayed as heroes, who internalized the message that the cowboy life, that part of American heritage, wasn't for them, wasn't about them, didn't include them. That's a theft of heritage, a theft of pride, a theft of historical identity that has real consequences. But the truth is coming out now. Slowly but surely, museums are updating their exhibits, historians are publishing more comprehensive studies, documentaries are being made, and people are learning that the West was far more diverse than Hollywood ever showed them, that black excellence was there from the beginning, that African Americans weren't just surviving, they were thriving, they were skilled, they were respected by those who worked with them, and they earned their place in history through sheer ability and courage. Let me paint you one more picture because I want you to really see this, really understand what we're talking about. It's 1870, you're riding drag on a cattle drive heading from Texas to Kansas. You've been in the saddle for 12 hours, your mouth is full of dust, your back is screaming, your horse is tired, but you keep going because the herd has to keep moving and you're a black cowboy. You're doing the same work as every other man on this drive, taking the same risks, enduring the same hardships, and tonight, when you reach camp, you'll eat the same food, sleep on the same hard ground, and tomorrow you'll do it all again. And when you reach Kansas in 2 months, you'll help sell the herd, you'll collect your wages, and you'll feel that pride, that deep satisfaction of having completed one of the hardest jobs in America, of having proven yourself again, of being a cowboy truly and completely, regardless of what anyone else might say about the color of your skin. That's who black cowboys were, that's what they accomplished, and that's the story that should have been told all along, the story that should be in every textbook, every museum, every film about the American West, because it's not just black history, it's American history, it's the real history of how the West was built. And here's what you can do right now, you can share this story, you can make sure the people in your life know about black cowboys, about their contributions, about the deliberate erasure they suffered. You can demand better representation in media. You can support museums and organizations preserving this history. You can read books about black cowboys, watch documentaries, teach your children the truth, because every time someone learns the story, every time someone's understanding of American history expands to include these men, that's a small victory against erasure, that's a step toward the full, accurate, honest history we all deserve. The black cowboys who built the American West deserve to be remembered. They deserve to have their names known, their skills celebrated, their courage honored. They were there, they did the work, they were essential, and no amount of Hollywood whitewashing can change those facts. So remember them, honor them, share their stories, because when we tell the complete truth about American history, when we acknowledge everyone who contributed, everyone who sacrificed, everyone who demonstrated excellence, we all benefit, we all gain a richer, more accurate understanding of who we are and how we got here. The American West wasn't built by one race, one group, one type of person. It was built by diverse hands, diverse skills, diverse courage, and black cowboys were right there in the middle of it all, riding, roping, driving cattle, living free, and creating a legacy that deserves to be remembered for all time. So don't let anyone tell you the cowboy story is just about white men in white hats, because that's not history. That's mythology, and you now know the difference, you now know the hidden truth about how black cowboys built the American West.